What's next for IT? In today's economy, technology touches every aspect of the day-to-day operations of business. There has never been more pressure on IT to deliver for our organizations. So what can we expect over the next decade? We need to think differently about how we approach our work to continue to thrive into the future. This requires all of us to be intentional in how we look at our role going forward. Smart IT is an approach to getting the important things done by transforming the way we think, work, and lead. And now, let's disrupt the status quo, simplify the complex, and reduce risk the smart IT way. Good morning, and welcome to another episode of the Smart IT Podcast. And today, it's a pleasure to welcome Christopher to the show. Hey, good morning, Christopher.
Good morning, William. It's good to see you again.
Well, Christopher, I've been roaming around in these virtual environments, working from coffee shops, working from my house, working from the beach. And I said, you know what? We need to do an episode where we just talk about the state of play for remote work. So top of mind for a lot of IT leaders and, of course, for a lot of actual professionals out there doing their work away from the office. So I looked around on my LinkedIn network. I said, you know what? I've not talked to Christopher in a long time. Let me check in on you, make sure you're doing okay. And then let's have a good conversation and explore what we look like in 2025 from just the ability to be away from the cables and the regular four walls here and to get work done from our businesses. So I said, let me give you a call and let's have a conversation about this.
Yeah. So first off, it's been great to hear from you. Thanks for being able to catch up on a couple of things. We've done a lot of adjacent work together over the years, so it was quite a joy to hear from you. Secondarily, as my role as the field CTO for the Americas at Omnissa, explain a little bit about who we are and what we are, and then I'll talk about the workforce and kind of where the industry, as we see it, is, and as I see it, is in 2025. So Omnissa as a company is the end user computing business unit formerly owned by VMware, acquired by Broadcom, then spent out as its own standalone company about a year ago from now, July 2025. So we've been operating and doing very well. And quite frankly, we are enjoying a little bit of autonomy and a bit of being able to do things that are best for our customer base. We do face a lot of challenges with our customers in 2025 because about 40% of US roles offer at least some sort of remote work option. And for fully remote postings are about 15% of all jobs that are posted out there. This is a triple increase from 2020. We don't suspect this is going to change. What this means for IT leaders is immense, because not only do you have to secure your network, your devices, your applications, but now you have to do it on somebody's home network and whatever they have at play. So it makes things challenging, but it is an incredible opportunity for us. And quite frankly, where the industry's at, it is a fundamental sociological shift in how people work. And you simply can't do that with old methods and old tools.
Yeah. So you're saying that the Starbucks network might not be corporate grade? It's always funny going to a restaurant or a library or some other public facility and trying to find that Wi-Fi connection. And then you have one guy say, hey, no, it's insecure. I have a hotspot in my pocket. Do you want to share? And then 4 or 5 people try to connect and it's kind of busy and it's, oh crap, this is horrible. And some people say, let's go back to the office and do work. So it is interesting that the actual network transport is important to have quality for when you try to get work done.
Mm-hmm. It used to be that you had to be like a black hat hacker to create a honeypot. But these days you can carry a device in your pocket that you downloaded, installed on a Raspberry Pi or some sort of Adreno. And now you have a honeypot that somebody connects to your Wi-Fi, and within a few minutes you have their passwords. That's the world we live in. So it is a drastically different world than, well, no, age discrimination, but for us, different world than we grew up in.
And us security minded people want to be real safe, so we'll throw on our VPN, and you think you're feeling pretty good, you're confident, and you go to this one website that you need to get access to. It's a productivity app, and it says, "Hey, this connection looks unusual. Are you using a VPN?" And it won't load the page. I'm like, "What's going on here? You're gonna force me to disable my VPN so I can use this app and then turn it back off?" So there is no simple, you just click the button and everything just works seamlessly. So I know for you,
Well,
go ahead.
Some of those prompts are actually malicious. They'll look like a corporate app. You hit OK and you're accepting a man in the middle certificate. So then they're intercepting, decrypting, looking at your traffic because a user hit OK to go look at their Gmail account.
Yeah. And this has deep implications, right? Because we're talking about the more casual, it's slightly inconvenient. So obviously everybody's been watching the news over the last couple months, and Pentagon and Secretary of Defense and the use of Signal. Think about the implications here, right? When you need to have highly secure communications and you're away from the secure location and you need to talk to people across an organization, it's not convenient every time to actually go, stop, drive to this office when something needs to happen after hours. So I know you probably encounter this a lot where organizations need to have secure communications with phones and laptops and devices. So let's talk about this play in 2025 with just this complexity to have people to be able to work and be productive when they need to be productive.
I think it takes a new set of skills and ideas to deliver securely in this world. So first off, the underlying strategy, flexibility has to be key for talent acquisition, all of those things. What was it? A GAO review tied telework to a lower churn rate in employees. So there's employee satisfaction and there's security. So we call it employee experience, and as the industry generally does. With that specifically, it is about device management, of course, but it's also about being able to do real-time device posture and posture of the connection to move from what I'll call legacy thoughts like conditional access, and I'll tell you why that's legacy, to more agentic AI responses like continual authentication. So conditional access. Basically, a user wants to access an application, they log in. At that moment, it checks their conditions. If you're good, you're allowed. If you're not, you're disallowed. There's all sorts of device signals. There's posture checking to make sure that that's a secure communication. However, specifically in like Windows kernels and desktop kernels, you can pause a process. You can insert a process in between if you have the level of access to do so. So you can pause a process, insert a process, return the process, and now you can intercept things with inside that local kernel, which is how many, malware devices and things work. So moving from just a initial condition of access, hence conditional access, one of the things that I believe strongly is we must move to a continual authentication to where even in the normal stream of work, I don't hand a user a token and say, you're good to access this resource for 8 hours, 10 hours, 2 days, 2 months. Instead, I hand them a token that says, you're good for 2 months, but I'm going to recheck this every 5 to 10 minutes on your input. And if I see anything that looks askew, the contextual authentication will revoke their access and make them re-authenticate and re-provide who they are. So the overall strategy needs flexibility, but we're being asked to do these things on managed devices and on devices that are not managed in any traditional way, which when you're doing any sort of device posture makes things really difficult. So that's kind of a long-winded answer, but hopefully that gives you some underlying strategy of the way we think about things, and how we're taking the signals to respond in an agentic AI fashion to real-time events to allow, deny, escalate, de-escalate in real time. Otherwise, I think it's a race to who has the fastest computer of who wins the hack.
Yeah, that's fascinating, because when you think about 100% of your employees in the same building, and we own the building, and we own the network switching, we like the cabling and the switching behind secure doors, and we're pretty confident, right? We can talk, me and you, if I go down to your office and talk to you, we're assuming the ones overhearing us. Our machines are employee owned, they're company owned, so we have good confidence. So, hey, it's fantastic. The business and the workforce want to be flexible. Now we start to move 5, 10, 15, 20% people out. Or if you have a pandemic, you send 95% of the people in the certain types of sectors home, but you still need to work and have business done and conducted. So IT, we figure out things, right? IT goes to the market, use some technologies. We build it around the strategy and say, once we leave the 4 walls, still has to be secured. That never goes away. So I like what we're talking about, how complex this is, talking about the device, talk about the transport, and to make sure it's secure, so we have our integrity intact. Now, it's interesting. You mentioned something earlier about, I guess, like employee experience and retention. So I guess let's talk about that, right? The strategy around allowing people to work outside the office beyond just a pandemic. Is it to retain newer employees who say, you know what, I got to have flexibility? Or is it to do experience or productivity? Yeah, let's talk about some of the things of the importance of why do you have a remote strategy in the first place?
So I think you have a remote strategy that fits your business. If you're a retail store, you can't have people in the cashier lane work remotely, right? That doesn't make sense. If you're a car dealership, you can't have your salespeople work remotely. They have to be there. So the remote work, or what I call anywhere work, is really more about doing what's appropriate for that employee. There are many jobs and many tasks that do not require face-to-face daily interaction to get things done. And in fact, being in an office environment can actually hinder people who are doing data science, development, knowledge workers to one degree or another, and the extra social interaction can quite frankly distract from getting the job done. So I don't recommend everybody work from home. I don't recommend everybody go into the office, but I think there's an intelligent approach to be able to support both. Now, the primary reason companies struggle so much in making these decisions is because they have based their IT management strategy on legacy thought processes like PC lifecycle management. Like you mentioned, I'm in a network. I have a network closet. It's a closed door. It's locked. And if all my topology is designed around that and my thought processes are designed around that, well, you're never going to get out of the office. You're also not going to be able to attract specific talent groups that companies need to get the next generation of the master's degree, the PhDs into your organization. why do they want to come sit in your office if their job doesn't require it? I think having a bit of flexibility is helpful. I don't think it has to be all way or another. And there are groups where everybody goes in the office and they do that very well. There are others where you do it when it's appropriate. And I'm for the approach of when it's appropriate. And if you have employees that are not performing, well, that's a management issue. It's not a where you're working from issue.
Yeah, definitely. And then also this is interesting because not only working anywhere, it's also anytime. So now we're talking, we got to support people at 3:00 in the morning. And obviously our IT staff isn't necessarily the same at 3:00 in the afternoon versus 3:00 in the afternoon. And then we have these organizations who get work across the globe. So now we're talking 24/7 coverage for support because if somebody needs to get something done at 3:00 in the morning, CIO's got to think about that. So let's think about the support structure where it's like, okay, now we're talking anywhere. Now it's anytime.
Mm-hmm. I think so. The help desk, like I wish that term would go away. I think we need like a experience desk or something of that sort. Also, I don't think it's a nice to have in 2025 moving forward of digital experience management, which is measuring how the employee's working, how things are behaving for them, and being able to respond to that using a AI ops engine. For example, Workspace ONE Intelligence gives you the ability to understand this user's working from home. They're connecting to a virtual desktop. Everything's working fine, except their Wi-Fi signal quality is like negative 80 dB. Well, if you don't have a tool that's measuring those things, that user calls into the help desk angry because things are going slow every other day. That's loss of productivity, that's time, that's user satisfaction. But if you have the ability to see that data in real time and then say, Mr. Reed, which could be both of us today,
Yes.
Right? You are having Wi-Fi signal quality. You need to either plug in a cable or two, move closer to the router and your experience will be better, but not to have a human do that, but AI operations be able to send that to a user as a text message, an email, a notification, a pop-up on their desktop or application experience so that you are managing that in full time. So it takes a very different approach to support. And it's something we've talked about forever. Honestly, how do I move from reactive to proactive? Fundamentally, you don't do that without measuring. You don't do that without informatics. And in today's world, you don't do that without AI infrastructure to take the millions of signals coming in and tell a person what's important.
Yeah, that's critical. And I like digital experience. So before I don't like help desk anymore. I love service desk. But I do like moving that service desk up to that higher level because the question could be, I'm trying to print something. I'm having trouble printing. What do you mean? Just print down the street. Well, I'm not in the office. I'm at home. How do I print? Or I'm getting on a very important meeting with the board of directors to talk about an acquisition. By the way, my video connection is crappy. So all of a sudden, the service desk can now get all these requests for quality across multiple devices, 24/7, and it's not just a simple answer: reboot your machine. So I like what you're saying, having information across the stack. We're talking about, really, right? Because if an executive want to know, hey, is it our app? Is it the connectivity, or is it just my Wi-Fi? And that's important to know very, very quickly for this full experience, because they don't say, well, it's 100% quality if you go to one of our branch offices versus if you're in Starbucks versus in your house. Then that's not going to cut it these days. So So let's talk
Well,
about getting it right from that. Yeah, that's
yeah, I think you bring up something interesting there because the telemetry from an endpoint is very, very important. And that's going to tell me how you're doing. But having an open ecosystem where, for example, I can back in connect systems. So let's say you lived in a world where you're about to get on that executive call and I have back end connectivity between my intelligence and AI ops and something like Zoom or Teams. And there's an outage on Zoom or Teams. Well, because I have that back end connectivity, I can front load the users and tell them what's going on and give them alternatives. So it is definitely about the informatics down at the endpoint and around the network and the app and the payload and all those other things. But it's also having the ability to connect that backend piece like a Zoom, like a ServiceNow help desk or ITSM, like a mobile threat product that's looking for phishing and things like that on your mobile devices, and bring all that together. That to me is really game changing. And I think it's one of the fundamental requirements that customers should be asking for. They need to understand that there's a whole nervous system around this thing called end user computing. And I can't just look at your finger and tell you what's wrong with your heart, right? I need to understand all of it. So looking at the device is important, and we'll see aspects of problems. Like if my fingers are turning blue, probably something wrong with my heart, right? But that's not a guarantee. So it's being able to look at the deep back-end systems at the same time as the endpoint informatics, and then correlate those. And in today's world, you're just not going to do so without heavy data science and a heavy focus on outcomes and data you actually need to see.
And it's getting to the point when we talk about remote and mobile, but when CIOs look at this is part of their overall strategy, right? Remote is a component of it. So we're starting to get into data center, and we have apps living in the cloud and where they live, and how do we support service level agreements? It gets very, very complicated. So I think sometimes people kind of pigeonhole it like, we'll just give Jeff the remote strategy thing, and we'll worry about the rest of the strategy over here. It's like, no. It's holistic across the board.
Yeah.
Now we got something interesting. We mentioned, I believe VDI. So it was, 15 years ago. I'm starting to date myself when we started to get into virtualization. Okay. We got it on the server side. Everybody was very comfortable with that. But then this whole concept, I used to be support PCs where you load up images, we load all these apps, very cumbersome. And then it started getting into this world of virtualizing the desktop itself, which was like, we're trying to tell them we have a base golden image, make changes, run scripts that are all going dynamically for I mean, it just blew my mind, right? And obviously that requires certain infrastructure to make sure latency was okay to get that experience. But let's talk about this power with this virtual desktop and all the infrastructure around it, this flexibility it gives us and the users out in the field.
So I think virtual is a tremendous way to deliver applications and desktop experiences. In today's world, you can deliver those from a cloud, any of the major clouds. You can deliver those from an internal data center, very straightforward way. There are multiple deployment methodologies. The real problem you're solving is what I will call Windows rot, and you're solving the composability of an experience. So it used to be that if I wanted a desktop experience back when I was young, I would take a Model T chassis in one end of the factory and I'd put an operating system, I'd update the firmware, I would then add applications and security tools. And then outside of that Model T factory came a black Model T, and you could have any color you wanted as long as it was the Windows device we were offering. I'm mixing metaphors on purpose.
I love it.
What a virtual desktop infrastructure and virtual apps give you is the ability at real time to simply join those components together for an experience. I want to use a virtual desktop. Okay. Operating system, policy, apps, security, user data. Do that in real time, compose it in real time, and deliver that experience from anywhere in a rich, meaningful, graphical way. Not the days of the 5250 emulator. Although some of them still put that inside the virtual desktop.
Yeah.
Drives me crazy. But I think it's a tremendous way to deliver resources. I do not think it's the only way. I think physical endpoints and devices are extremely important. And I think it is a mixing of what is the best way to deliver X for my group. And if I have mountain climbers and they're out surveying areas, they probably are not connecting to a virtual desktop.
Yeah.
But if I have a knowledge worker, that makes a lot of sense. If I have a developer, makes a lot of sense. The other advantage is, yes, the composable infrastructure, but then the adjacency to the data. You may have a huge data lake that your data scientists need to interoperate with, but it's in North America, but you're in Israel or the Ukraine or UK or India. But you can't copy that data around the world efficiently, but you can connect remotely and manipulate it. So I see a lot of those use cases as well. I call that data gravity. Lots of advantages. My goal is to find ubiquitous ways to deliver the correct experience at the correct time. If that's virtualization, love it. If it's not, that's why we all have PCs and local apps, or Macs and local apps, because it does take a mix of various things. How you manage that becomes key, but I don't think there's a singular way to do everything for everybody.
It's funny. I used to bump into people who say, man, forget the desktop. I'm not doing Windows. I got off my Linux. I'm doing everything. We're going to, how about developers? Develop this nice, cool corporate app, and I get everything working. And then you look at them and say, what's wrong? With something I can't do or see, or I can't print it, or I got the data, but I can't interact with two other apps. Darn it, I need to go back to a desktop. But it all depends, right? It's context specific. Like, what are you doing at that particular time? So if you're out in the field one time, the mobile app might work great. Maybe you get back to your car, you go to the Starbucks, you pop the laptop out. Maybe you do a virtual desktop. Maybe later in the day, you get back to the corporate office, you're back on your PC, and you have this full spectrum of data access, all your applications, and security and collaboration with people who might be next to you. So that's a lot on the CIO's plate, right? When they do this full spectrum, anytime, anywhere access to the data in the way I want to use it. And it's all behind the scenes, right? So the business sees and says it just works. Or when it doesn't, you get that friction. So talk about—
Well, and it's not just a security issue. When we're doing that, what you just mentioned goes right into context. So what if you lived in a world where your applications themselves were aware of context, meaning that if I am not in the corporate office, launch this way. If I am in the corporate office, launch this local app. If I were, I think as we move forward, the ability to drive context to be less of a end user human decision and more of the overarching IT framework of, I want you to be able to use this resource, but based off of where you are, who you are, what time it is, the network you're on, your current experience and bandwidth, I'm going to deliver to you this version of that application. I think that's not only for security, but I think as we continue to move forward, that will be for just day-to-day understanding what a user is doing programmatically and responding to it.
Yeah, I really love that because you start to think about sometimes you just need us to do certain type of data entry, but you don't need the full experience. So if I need quick and dirty, I need to pass this information on to you or collaborate or just maybe review something. I don't need full editing capabilities. Give it to me the workspace in a way that I can do this review or do this update or authorize and take some of that workload off the human to say, oh my God, do I have my laptop? Do I have my phone? Where's the office? Is there Wi-Fi connectivity? That's a lot of manual tasks for people to be dealing with. So this digital experience, anywhere, anytime access, this productivity capability is something you can build. IT can build for their organization. So that's good
And
news, I think.
I think they have to. I mean, think of the family in our own lives. Like, how equipped are they of understanding how best to launch an application at any given time? And not unintelligent people. I have a very good friend of mine who is a doctorate of leadership. He does seminars. We talk often, but I'm not calling him or letting him touch my computer. Like, like my dear friend, you're a brilliant person, but there's certain skills that he doesn't have. So I think we have to be more aware of those things as the IT provider. And the reason so many organizations struggle with this is some of those fundamentals are just, if you're taking a traditional PC lifecycle management, the Henry Ford Model T model of delivering things, you never get to the Iron Man suit.
Oh, yeah.
The Iron Man suit builds itself around the person. And that's what we need our digital experience to be from a security perspective, but also from an experience perspective.
Yeah, there's nothing worse. We're starting to get to performance problems of that latency where the hourglass is a little slow, or you click the confirm or done button, there's a slight delay. The user notices any delay across the board. And then you're trying to figure out if it's the app, is it the database connection? Oh, by the way, there's 3 API connections to third parties. Where are you connecting from? So when IT had the support model, when they're building it and designing it, it has to take that into consideration. They need that feedback back to the architectural team and the engineers to say, we're engineered and designed these solutions to have a certain SLAs, certain performance characteristics. And if we don't meet it, we're going to hear about it. Like, this thing is slow or it's clunky. And he said, why you keep double clicking on it? Well, I didn't do it. Well, no, you got to give it just an extra second. Where are you connected from? So the problem is intermittent. So I like when you start talking about trying to understand what the experience is to kind of pin down and predictably get in front of it. Are the issues, or do we need to educate the population about certain tasks and things you may need to do differently just because of the context of where you're working?
I think we need to educate the individual. We also need to prepare our leaders throughout the organization, and we have to shift them to an outcome-based leadership approach. I don't really care how you get there. I just care that you get there. When I look at something like the State of Remote Work 2025, I think NEAT put that out. They show 30 to 45% higher productivity, some even 47% gains. When there is digital friction, those things go away immediately. So it's balancing the friction, the user experience. And I'm not probably saying anything that most of the listeners don't already know. What I'm hopefully doing is extending hope that there is an agentic way to achieve this, rather than I, as a CIO, CTO, have to staple together things to make this happen. And it's that balance. It's not easy, but it is doable.
And it's interesting, you mentioned a couple of times the word friction. And then when we get into control friction, or even just productivity friction, where we got to change the way we're thinking about something because the interface changes, we switch to a Chromebook over to a Windows box, over to Linux. And then man, it's like, oh crap, this particular app doesn't work on Linux, or it kind of works, but the browser's different. It's Safari versus Internet Explorer. It's slight tweaks, and then the user can sense it, and they got to get used to what that looks like. So it's that side of performance and experience. And then on the security side, it's how many times do I need to click it? Okay, you're going to text me something on my phone to let me log in. Okay, no, I need to have an authenticator on my phone, then you let me in. So you imagine environments like the doctor's environment where they need to log on quickly. Okay, is it a badge? Is it biometric? Then all of a sudden, these different systems, when we design them, we got to be very, very aware what the level of friction is when we ask people to switch tasks and kind of really interrupt their work.
Yeah, I think there's appropriate friction. Like there's some places where you don't want it to be too easy. But I think with modern approaches like passwordless, certificate-based auth, claims-based authentication, we can achieve both. We can achieve a practically zero friction environment where now my face is my authentication, or my fingerprint is my authentication, or a certificate that goes along with that is my authentication. So it's less friction for the end user, but it's more checks and balances for security. You do need some friction, right? Otherwise anybody can just access anything, and that's not good for anybody. But it's how do I balance the friction of the traditional, well, it needs to be secure, so make it harder to get to, versus what I think it should be today. It needs to be secure, so make there be a better path to get to it that you can only do one way. You know every single time exactly how it works, and you have all the logs and auditing and checks and balances you need to ensure that it was accessed appropriately.
Oh, so we're starting to get into the whole talk about governance here, because it was easy when it was just, okay, it's you have 1,000 employees, you doesn't work remotely, that's fine. And then the businesses say we need to onboard some more vendors and third parties. They're going to help with some of our business processes. So some of these people from the third party need to connect to some of our databases. What? Database? Okay, old day we throw a VPN up. Oh, no, that's kludgy. We'll just go to APIs. We'll let the developer do API. And then somebody said, there's like a password on the API connectivity. And then sometimes IT lose track of, oh my God, there's 500 APIs. And sometimes the developers are hard coding. And then we trying to figure out if we have 100 third party and contractors, and then some of these contractors could be in IT side and some in finance. Now let's talk about this anytime, anywhere, to anyone. Now we have to govern the fact that it's a lot of our productivity we do for our businesses is coming from third parties. So let's talk about this whole complex nature of limiting what a contractor can do, when they can do it, which data they can do it, and then the work you have to do to design this on the back end and make sure when they RDP into your box, they don't have access to 500 of the servers. And now it starts to come, oh my God, who is this contractor and why can he see stuff behind DMZ now? So let's talk about the governance structure and the complexity there.
So it's really interesting. There are a couple of organizations I've worked with recently doing M&A activity where you must allow a great number of contractors into the environment through APIs, through other various means. And as an analogy, as much as I love having company over at my house, I really appreciate it when they come in the front door. The guy crawling in the window in the back, like he might be my best friend, but that's just kind of weird, right?
Yeah.
So don't do that. So one of the things that we've done is a cross-organization identity brokering, so that regardless of where you're going from one organization to the other, you have to use approved authentication mechanisms. And I may be at company A accessing resources at company B, and I will always use that contractor of company A's resources, even though I'm acquiring this other company. That way there's always a log. That can apply to APIs. That can apply to user authentication. That can apply to a lot of things. But I think that's where I go back to you have to define the path. And when you define the path, you can define the checks and balances. But when you get the developer in who says, I need an ODBC connection to a database, no, sorry. You can have an OAuth token to this API that will expire in every month, and you have to reset it. And if you're going to do something in production, that has to go to another group, and they'll do an OAuth token that will actually work for longer than a month. And if you don't do those things, you're asking for trouble.
So there's a lot of implications here, right? So we're in this type of environment to set this policy up, to say this is how we're going to govern all this access from all these third parties. Our infrastructure has to be capable of doing it, right? We have to know where our assets are, where our databases live, where's the sensitive data. If there's some data that has some PCI information, is it personal identifying information? So we got to know what this data is, where it lives, who should have access. So when we're talking about this, I think some companies are struggling, right? Because maybe they got some of the technology components, but maybe their security program isn't very mature. Maybe their IT acquisition or provisioning isn't very secure. Because once again, it's back to IT leadership, where our program of delivering, designing, deploying solutions and capabilities that are secure and reliable, that's a very high bar, right? So this isn't for the faint of heart to say we're struggling while we're struggling, and you start to assess what's the technology stack look like to support the business. And sometimes you can find out very quickly, like, governance, what do you mean governance or audit, or we don't have an audit committee, or who updates the board, and how do we know we need to fund certain things based off of business priorities? Then you start to see the gaps and understand this is the difference between organizations that are mature technology deployment versus those who are just sticking in technology here and there. And you can kind of see that, how kludgy it looks. So I'm thinking you could probably tell in the first few minutes of talking and looking at the organization who's going to have problems deploying more sophisticated and complex infrastructure.
I always want to understand when I'm talking to somebody and they're looking to deploy anything, where's the start of authority? So just a quick bit of history, and let's go back to Notes. Loved some Domino, loved some Lotus Notes back in the day. It had its own username and password database as a standalone application. Every application built at that time had its own separate user ID and password. So the world realized very quickly, like, well, that's crazy. Hence the rise of Novell, hence the rise of directory services. Well, now fast forward 30 years from those days, now hence the rise of metadirectories and directories of directories and relationships between directories and claims and authentication rules. It's no longer a simple LDAP directory. And if I'm going to understand and solve these access problems, I have to start with the start of authority. And you can have multiple start of authorities when it comes to identities and what they should access. Some are intra application, some are extra application, but all of which need to tie in with some sort of meta directory that you can then make decisions of not only can this user access, more importantly, can this device access, tertiary, can they access from this location, and do they meet this criteria? So that start of authority is the primary conversation when somebody's looking to do better governance, and you have to choose one. It doesn't mean that is your start of authority forever and you're stuck with it, but you have to say this is the authoritative source for entitlements, and then let that propagate out. There are multiple ways to do that, but from my perspective, if you're going to solve a governance problem, you have to build proper gates and fences. And kind of to the house analogy, I have a front door. That's the place to be. Like, come to the house. And if you're trying to crawl through the bathroom window, well, this is Texas. You might get hurt.
Yeah. That looks very suspicious. What's going on there? Hold it now.
Yeah.
I'll be right back and we'll get something.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, we got a lot of new things coming on the horizon here. So we talked about the desktop, the laptop, maybe got a tablet, the phone. Now we got the smartwatches. We're going to get into this whole field of spatial computing where the smart goggles, glasses, maybe some Tony Stark virtual displays or interfaces, a lot of interfaces with the voice. We got a lot of different ways that come in the next 10 years where it's going to be doing that experience down to different ways of interfacing with wearables and other things. So how do you see this future looking where we have to expand our capabilities and make sure we're on top of our game with these new ways of interfacing with compute?
The future is autonomous. Autonomy means the system has a realm of control to make its own decisions. That's going to apply to spatial computing, and it already is. It's going to apply to end user computing, and it's already starting to do that, from the nervous system of all the things that are out there helping you make better decisions about things. Autonomy is the future path of end user computing and systems. I liken it to a self-driving car. My wife and I did a 48-hour test drive recently just for fun of a self-driving vehicle. And I live in the Houston area, which is driving is enough of an adventure just in and of itself. But you simply put in the destination on the map, and then it is your ability to either trust or not that it's going to make good decisions. When I was in the vehicle for the first 5 to 10 minutes, I was tense. My hands were hovering right over that steering wheel.
Yeah.
It took a while for me to realize it generally makes pretty good decisions. And there's a degree of autonomy I can give it to simply get me where I need to go. That self-driving capability is at the foundation of what we're building. And I think many others are aspiring to create end user computing systems that's more about William Reed and less about the desktop in front of you, the Chromebook, the mobile device, and to be able to bring that into something that is both bespoke to your needs, contextual to your environment, and available anywhere, anytime.
I love that, man. That's a powerful thing to be an IT leader and walk in front of business people and tell them where we are right now and what's coming, and to help drive those business initiatives to maybe even inspire them and say, hey, we can do something new that our competitors can't do today, because our workers can work differently, and we can do that because we can build or improve capability in our stack and the way we design our architecture. And here's what the next maybe couple of years looks like. That's what business people want to hear from IT leaders.
Yeah. I would challenge any business person or IT leader, ask them what their fundamental data and AI architecture looks like. And when you start scaling to the millions of endpoints with the billions of signals coming in, fundamentally, that can't be a traditional database. So that, quite frankly, is the Achilles heel of most of my brethren in this industry right now. I think they're all working to address that, but I can't just add more memory and expect it to get better. There's a fundamental architectural difference between what we're building and have built and where the rest of the industry is. So I hope I get an opportunity to maybe spend some time with any of your listeners. I'd be happy to go over that in detail. But that is the Achilles heel of the end user computing industry right now, is data architecture and scalability, except for us.
Yes. I mean, so great opportunity here to imagine, reimagine, and bring even more value to non-techies. So on our side of the house, we can what you call it, love the complexity and what the stack looks like. And that gives us the confidence to know we can actually deliver this with the right service level agreements, performance characteristics, security governance. But we just know we can smile and we see, yeah, our business is doing something new and different. And I know why. Yeah. Our team built this.
As much as you like the smell of the leather, sometimes it's nice to open the hood and see that there's something there powerful enough to carry you where you need to be.
Yes.
That's an analogy we can all understand.
Yes. If you got out that self-driving vehicle and open the hood and find out there's nothing there, like, whoa, how's this thing? What's going on here?
Yeah. Well, I will tell you, I did take over once and I pushed the pedal all the way down. Yeah. And I think the skin about peeled off my face. It was pretty intense. So
I love that. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you want to lead the audience with?
Just say a big thanks. It's been, many, many years working with you and your team. Very excited to spend some time with you. Thanks for reaching out. We strive to provide the absolute best to our customers. So serving as CTO for the field of Omnissa in the Americas, it's a great privilege and honor to serve internally and our customers. And just a huge thank you to yourself and the team for putting this together today.
Hey, that's been fantastic. So if anybody in the audience looking to talk strategy and see what you can do, what's coming out there, hey, definitely reach out to Christopher. Great resource to have.
Happy to do so.
Yeah. So with that, we're going to close out another episode of the Smart IT Podcast. Until next time, take care. Thanks for joining another episode of the Smart IT Podcast, where we explore what's next for IT and disrupt the status quo, simplify the complex, and reduce risk together. If you like what you hear, please like, subscribe, and leave your comments. And for more Smart IT wisdom, check out my website at williamreed.info.